And with that, Amy, Devin, we're going to kick this thing off. Thank you guys again for joining us. Like I said just a minute ago, I've really been looking forward to having you guys on. Talk a little bit about Toy Storage Nation. I always kind of like fumble my words when I say that. I don't know why, but it's always a little bit of fun. And something that, like I said, looking forward to because this is something, especially in my area in Charleston, South Carolina, where I currently reside, that is definitely growing in popularity. So with that, I want to do a little bit of introduction with Amy. Amy, would you tell us a little bit about yourself,
Sure.
how that you got into self-storage and your current role?
Mhm. So I'm president of Toy Storage Nation, and to give you a little bit of background on what Toy Storage Nation is, because we get a lot of folks that don't quite understand what we are. Are you a consulting group? Are you facilities? Are you, that type of thing? We're a media education brand. We have a website, toystoragenation.com, that has a ton of content. I'll talk a little bit about that more in a moment. We have full day workshops where we cover A to Z, all the information, all the topics that you would need to know for developing, owning, investing, boat and RV. But our real strength is our advisory board. If you go to our website and look at who is on our advisory board, there are folks there that I guarantee that very well known in storage and boat and RV. Folks that had been in storage but saw the wave coming with boat and RV, and they do specific things for boat and RV. We're happy to have Devin Beasley with us today. He is one of our advisory board members, who really has educated himself and is really focusing on boat and RV storage. So my background is I have 20 plus years, close to 25, ages me a bit, of media education experience. I've worked for Informa, William Reed, so a lot of B2B. My background previously was in other industries, but I came into this about 3 years ago. It was more of a family thing, that it was a brand that Bob Hayworth of Baja Construction and my husband Troy Bix at the time had been building a boat and RV facility. This was about 10 years ago. They themselves ran into an issue and there was nowhere to go for information. So they sat on it for about 10 years. Then the pandemic hit and they thought, I can't believe nobody's really covering this the way it needs to be covered. And of course, ISS and the other brands cover the storage market wonderfully. This is just a portion of it that wasn't getting the attention it needed. So they themselves have full-time jobs. Bob is very busy running Baja. My husband's very busy running a division of Janus. And so what we did is we brought in a team of media folks, myself, and then I've got a team who has previous storage experience who's come over with me. And we are specifically covering the boat and RV market.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. Devin, I wanted to take a little second to introduce you. I know that your audio kind of you using your phone kind of back and forth and stuff like that. So bear with us for today so that make sure we get good audio. We can hear you really well. Devin, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, how you got into storage.
Yeah, a little bit about my background. Started, with Cushman & Wakefield, really my self-storage team out of Tampa. I'm in Phoenix. Started with a self-storage team about 8 years ago with Marcus and Millichap. I was the first hire on the West Coast for my team, really specifically based in Tampa, and then we grew out to the West. And in 2019, our team, moved over to Cushman & Wakefield to run Cushman & Wakefield Self-Storage Advisory Group of the U.S. About 2.5 years ago, almost the same period as Amy, I started the RV and boat portion of our team. I kind of saw the writing on the wall with traditional self-storage, and where RV and boat storage is going. It's kind of on the precipice of where self-storage was about 25 to 30 years ago, moving from the Class C sites, all dirt lots, no fencing, no canopies, to the institutional side of self-storage, where you see these Class A facilities on Main and Main everywhere now. And that's kind of the same place I think RV and boat storage is. We're moving from that Class C space, industrial yards, the backyards of people's houses where they're just charging people $25 to park there for the year, to more institutional grade RV and boat. And Amy has a great definition of Class A facilities. It's really paved lots, asphalt or concrete drives, enclosed secure fencing, security, amenities. That's kind of what, not to put words in Amy's mouth, that's kind of what Toy Storage Nation is all about, is a Class A feel. And I think that's where the industry is heading, is that Class A, facility. So that kind of went into my presentation. That's kind of, my background and how I got into the business.
Awesome. I know that, did you want to do your presentation? Did you have a slideshow or anything that you want to bring up? Just let me know.
Yeah, I'll bring up a slideshow. I kind of spoke yesterday. Amy knows I like presenting, but I love questions. So if you want to ask questions, you want to throw them out there. I think a lot of people will get more out of that, but I'll definitely bring up the presentation and run through it at a very, very high level, if that works for you.
That would be great. Yeah. And if anybody, just like Devin said, if you have any questions or things, please put them in the chat. If you're watching us live on Facebook, I am monitoring as well. You can feel free to put your questions in there. If they come up, you can ask Devin, or later on, if you want to ask personal or another question or something else like that, I'll bring you up in a little bit.
And while Devin does that, I did want to bring up, Devin, thank you for bringing that up. We really do advocate for Class A. And as Devin said, it's 4 simple things. It's our stake in the ground. It needs to be covered in some manner, whether that's enclosed or canopy. It needs to be paved. It needs to be gated, and it needs to be fenced. On top of that, any technology, such as a Nogi, something like that would make it an A+. And then, of course, what goes along with that are all the amenities and conveniences these folks are willing to pay for. And I know Devin will talk about that. This folks that can afford these very expensive toys that are coming out now, hundreds of thousands of dollars for boats, RVs, whatnot, they're willing to pay the price. They want it secured, protected, and conveniences when they're there. And they're willing to drive a little bit further. So I don't want to go over things that Devin's going to talk about, but that's really what we focus on.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to share my screen here. Can you see it okay?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So I'm going to jump into it. And like I said, we're going to talk pretty high level. I'm not going to hit every point in the presentation, but I'll just go over some specific points. So really, we're just going to go through this little roadmap of what we put together. 1, should I build my site solo or invest in a partnership? 2, why is investing in the RV and boat facility so desirable? Right now, we're going to kind of skip over the myths and what to watch out for. But 3, where's the RV and boat industry headed? And I think, all these are what my clients specifically, I would say, speak to me about on a daily basis. So I think it would be at least good information for everybody in this chat. So should I build my site or invest in a partnership? And factors to consider for building your own site, these are just 3 out of, I would say, hundreds of factors, but I can only pick 3 for, a 15-minute presentation. So what makes a strong location for a development? Visibility, and to and from a destination. Visibility is really, are you visible from the thoroughfare that you're building on? Unlike traditional self-storage, you don't have to be main and main. You don't have to be in an urban setting. What I would say is you do have to be on a pathway to or from a destination, and as close to a certain destination as you can. Most of the renters nowadays, they want that convenience of being able to access a location, drop off their rig, drop off their boat, clean it, and then get home, right? So that visibility, that marketing is definitely a top priority, in my opinion. There was, and I'm an example person as well, so excuse me, but we visited a site during one of Toy Storage Nation's events just north of Vegas. And, when you're leaving Vegas going north, about 30 minutes through the desert, it opens up to a Love's gas station facility. And it has a RV component to it. And it was nearly 100% full. And you wouldn't think that this facility would be full in that market, but it was to or from a destination, and it had high visibility from a highway. So I believe you do need that visibility. Access, of course, you want great access to a property, but in this presentation is really, how accessible is your development to where you reside, right? A lot of my clients want to be at least an hour to an hour and a half flight to their facility so they can get out there, handle any third-party issues that they may have, and then travel back. Especially if it's your first site, you want to be as hands-on as possible to to understand the inner workings of the facility in case you want to build a portfolio. You know, the first one's your guinea pig. The next ones, you want to make sure that you build them correctly. And then size and rent cost. So size, 7 to 20 acres is the sweet spot for a lot of people. You can go smaller. I sold a deal here in Mesa, Arizona. It was 3 acres. It was 168 spots, but the rents were close to $1, right? Most rents I've seen across the nation, you average, if it's Class A, you average in that 55 cents to, I would say, 75 cents a square foot rent, right? There's certain locations where you can get higher, but that's the reason why you need a bigger facility, because of course the spaces are bigger, 12 by 30, 12 by 45 and up for the Class A. Rent comps, that's a big sticking point for a lot of people because there's not a lot of comp information out there right now. You have Yardi that's tracking a few. I think they have 1,800 facilities in their database. StoreTrack has around 4,000 facilities in their database. We all know there's more RV and boat facilities out there, but the consolidation of the market is still happening. So the information is very limited for the time being. So for rent comps, I would say the average drive time for an RV user to a facility is about 15 miles to 30 minutes. So you can look in that radius of 15-mile drive time, 15-mile drive radius to look for comps. But sometimes, because it's such a new product type for Class A, you will have to go out further, right? I know some people in Florida go out to an hour and a half to find rent comps that work for their facility. Moving on to how much do you have to invest? Right now, interest rates are, if you're basing off of SOFR, and I think SOFR today is around 5.3. The lenders that I've talked to, they do SOFR plus 300, plus 350 in today's market. So you're talking about 8.5 to 9% interest rate on your construction loan in today's market. And then, depending on the strength of the buyer, you'll be at 70 to 85% LTC. So not the greatest of terms right now. It's really going to be dependent on what the Fed does moving forward this year. But my biggest point in this section is how will investing in a development affect your life right now, your business side of your life and your personal side of your life. If you're building a $10 million facility and you put down 20%, that's $2 million, right? How much will that $2 million affect your personal life moving forward? Will you have enough, if your construction reserves dry up, to be able to cover that delta for development? A client of mine had, he obtained a 3% floating rate in 2021 to build his traditional self-storage facility. When it opened its doors, he was at a 9% rate in 2023 at C of O. So he went from a $30,000 debt service a month to an $80,000 debt service. Thankfully, he was a multimillionaire, so he was comfortable. He could cover that delta each month until he was in the black. But I don't know a lot of people who can do that. So just make sure you're cognizant of what you're putting out and what you're expecting in return. And that kind of flows into the 5 to 10 year business plan, right? Understand your development timelines. I would say plan 5 to 10 years out. A lot of people in today's market, especially new developers, are planning 1 to 3 years out. And that's really the people I'm talking to. And I tell them, look, nobody expected COVID, right? That was a 2.5 year process of trying to figure out the market, right? But if they planned 10 years out, it wouldn't have been perfect, but at least you could have alleviated some of the issues you would have had, like the gentleman we talked about that went from a 3% loan to 9%. Become familiar with, this is a big one for me, become familiar with county requirements and personnel, right? Timing is everything in this industry. So I would say be familiar with the requirements of the county, what kind of zoning it is. I would say don't chase, this is my personal opinion, but don't chase that's not zoned correctly. For the time being, that's time that somebody else can come into your market and develop next to you and compete with you. If you do find a piece of property that's not zoned correctly, but it's in a great location, of course, chase it, but you want to cut down on that timeline. There was another one of my clients, was building in an East Coast city, not to name names, and they had almost completed their pre-construction, but the city engineer came back and said we had to change a few things in the plan to make it suitable for the build. Well, that change lasted 8 months, right? So it was an extended change period, which should have only taken 1 to 2 months. So he went over their head, and I'd say you should do this, but he went over their head to the city manager, and they got to move through within a month and a half, right? So I would say know the people in the jurisdiction, become friends with them, understand what they're looking for as far as requirements, and that'll help you in the long run. And that kind of leads into municipalities pushing back. I mean, it's just going to be in the nature of the business. It's not like traditional storage. You know, you're putting 10 to 20 acres in the path of growth for a lot of cities if you're building in a good location. And the long-term plan for a lot of those cities either going to be single-family housing, retail centers, multifamily, and you're putting down an RV and boat facility that really doesn't have, you know, employee tax benefits. So be cognizant that you are going to have some pushback if you're in a really, really good location. Any questions so far? I'm just
A
drilling
couple
on here.
that Cedric had on here. Cedric was asking how far, kind of go, you know, referring to the last slide, Devin, how far away
Mhm.
is too far from the destination?
I don't think there's, you know, there is a certain metric that says how far away. I really think it's, you know, who's in the market, what kind of competitors are in the market, and like I said, access, right? I know that people are willing to drive up to an hour and a half for a good location, as long as it provides what they need to provide, right? Just certain amenities, whether it's a dump station, whether it's, you know, ice is a whole different thing, but a wash, whatever it may be, electrical, you know, triple charge, solar, people will drive for convenience because that's what they're doing, honestly, anyways, right? They're driving to a destination to relax, so they're willing to drive to your facility as well. So I would say up to an hour. I wouldn't go too much further than that unless you're in a very, very tertiary market where you have to drive further out.
So I have a question on that same aspect. So if you're, let's say you're in a, I'm in Phoenix, but let's say a different market, Nashville, and you've got multiple lakes and or stuff around that area or other parks for those RV people. If they live in the main metro, will they drive 2 hours to get to the storage lot, and then the storage lot is 15 miles from the destination? Is it easier that way than they are going to truck it 2 hours or 3 hours to the destination from their home?
I really think it's going to be dependent on that mentality of that owner, right? The person who's going to be renting it. A lot of people, well, I can't say a lot, but some people want to have that drive because they are vacationing, so they're willing to drive up to that facility. And some people want it to be 15 miles away so they can get there, clean their vehicle, prepare for their road trip, which may be across the country. So I think it's going to be tenant based on that question.
Okay.
And I know that's kind of a broad answer, but you know, it's okay.
I get a question about that feasibility study. Is that everything is covered existing and the new and combined together to get through those feasibility study, right?
So are you saying combined for feasibility studies?
Yeah, feasibility study, you have to consider existing, storage versus the new and the population and those kind of consideration also, right?
Correct. You take all that into consideration. The existing new development. I know specific feasibility consultants, they will not include traditional self-storage with an ancillary RV and boat. They really look for a standalone RV and boat, which just makes complete sense in that market. Usually and this kind of goes off on your question, but usually for traditional self-storage, they're not really pushing the RV and boat side of it aggressively. So it's hard to take those into consideration when you're doing a feasibility. But yes, you take into consideration the whole entire RV and boat market, whether that be, if you can find it, whether that be, the Class C, Class Bs in the market, in Class A, so know what your competitive set is.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Quick
And there
question
was
related.
there was one more question that like so Adam was asking, you know, 5 to 10 years, is that usually for stabilization, or kind of what's your time frame for that? Are you looking at, or are you seeing, Devin?
Yeah, no, yeah. So stabilization. So I underwrite 18 to 24 months, depending on the size of the facility. Right, that's an average of 250 spaces to 300 spaces. 18 to 24 months. I've seen them lease up much faster. I've seen that size facility pre-lease to pre-lease before the doors open, and then fully stabilized in 6 months. But in today's market, I would not suggest underwriting that way, right? I suggest underwriting as conservative as possible. And when you pass your metrics, be happy that you passed your metric, right? But you know that 10-year time frame is really just taking into consideration what your long-term goals are. Is it to hold and build a portfolio over 10 years and then flip out to a REIT if the REITs are in the market at that time? Or are you just building one and selling a C of O, or whatever it may be, to realize your returns? So that's what I mean by just have a 10-year business plan and work backwards to what you're trying to achieve.
We're in so some of the data that you guys are gathering for like feasibility, I want to kind of, you know, based on what Kevin was asking, where do you find the best data to, you know, look at a feasibility? You know, you got a certain area. So like example, me, I've got a certain area that I'm looking at. What would you use to kind of go start poking around and finding data that, you know, a boat and RV storage facility would be feasible in this particular area?
Yeah, so we look at a few different sources of information. One, we do it internally. I speak with Amy on a number of times as well, because she has a lot of information from a lot of different clients. We use, like I said, Yardi. We use StoreTrack. We use Radius Plus. For Cushman & Wakefield, you know, I'm an advisor and broker, but we do have a in-house research team as well, an evaluation team. So we use everything that we can to be able to examine the market right now. Once, you know, it becomes more and more institutionalized, I believe there's going to be more and more information out there. But we are picking and grabbing for the time being, and doing as much due diligence and research in-house as we can.
Gotcha. And I'm not promoting StoreTrack, but I definitely know that it's just, you know, from talking to James Waring over there, that's, you know, my contact from storage, you know, from StoreTrack, is one of the things that they're definitely getting and gathering more and more and more data on. So that's one of the things, if somebody's interested, you know, you can reach out to StoreTrack and look at that for data. I think Brian, you had a question?
Yeah, quick question. So, and mine was older. So in my experience, when I had about 42 spaces, smaller facility, mainly self-storage, also 42 RV spaces, almost 70% of the people that had an RV space also had an additional unit for additional stuff storage, whether it's their jet skis they tow in there as well, or, you know, their inflatables, whatever. Is there a metrics that says, okay, for every 10 spaces, 60 or 70% or less have an additional unit? Because I'm looking at a site where it's about 10 acres. I can probably get about 250 units, including, I think, about 85 auxiliary traditional storage units to coincide with the boat and RV. Should I continue to look that direction, or is I mean, if I'm looking at a life space or life, whatever it is, a lot of those don't have auxiliary storages. They're next door or down the street in Scottsdale as an example, but not on site. Is there a comment to that?
Amy, were you gonna say something?
Oh, I was just gonna say, you know, and Devin, you could probably speak to it better because you do have in-house feasibility, but unit mix is something that I always refer someone back to a feasibility person looking at your specific area, because every site is different, every area is different, and they'll look at all of kind of the factors that come into that. I know Greg Ellsworth, who happens to be out in Arizona as well, is a fan of traditional storage incorporated into an overall boat and RV design. Some are really for it. Some are like, hey, let me look at, you know, your area. But I know a lot of times that developers and owners might have a particular unit mix in mind that they just think is going to work, and the feasibility study comes back and it's a changed idea of what it should be. And there are feasibility, just like Devin is an expert in boat and RV, and they can do this in-house as well. There are experts within the boat and RV market, a Joe Beth White, a Jim Chiswell, R.K. Kleimenstein. I'm amazed that it's still not known that there are folks that are specifically focusing on boat and RV and can look into that for you. So Brian, if you need any contacts, let me know. I'm sure Devin could help you. But if you need any further than that, reach out to me as well. And I'm sorry, Devin, to leapfrog you because you probably got the perfect answer for it.
No, you're fine.
I think like if I was a user, I would want that extra space to throw the extra and not
Makes
store it
sense,
either in the
right.
RV or in the boat, particularly in the boat.
Mhm.
But that was just my own experience in the past. So before I get into a $10 or $20 million site, I need to know, like I said, do a feasibility.
The feasibility is well worth your time and money. That's the thing that I always, it's hard for me to understand that I get a lot of calls that people will ask me, this is the area I'm looking, this is the mix. And I say, you need to talk to a feasibility person, and it's well worth your time because what
I
you're
agree.
thinking
I've done
may
that before.
completely change. So.
I was trying to get I've done it before, and before I pulled the trigger on spending, $6,000 to $10,000 on the feasibility study, because I'm not even a contractor on the site yet. I was trying to do some preliminary due diligence to say, okay, how far down the path do I want to go, or rabbit hole, if you want to call it that. Because the site looks good, and the location's decent, but I want to make sure some of that stuff is before I get too far down the road. Thank you.
Gotcha. I had one last question, and then Devin will kind of continue on a little bit. Tom was asking underwriting question. And it's about a specific area. I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer or not, but on Facebook, he was asking, Lake Mead water levels have tanked in the past. Is it something that would be considered against building near Boulder City or Vegas?
Because of the tank?
I'm sorry?
As you said, because the lake has dried up a little bit.
I know this is more specific about a certain area, but
no, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, honestly, the lake has come back from what we've seen. I don't know if that helps out with that question, but I think it's really going to be dependent on how many people visit that lake now, right? You kind of research that information, see how many visitors they have per year, and see if it makes sense to build in that location. I wouldn't want somebody to go in to a destination where a lake is receding. You don't have as many visitors as you used to, and you won't have as many customers as you used to, right? And to Amy's point, myself and my team, we do a high level feasibility, but once you start getting more granular, specifically to that question, I think you definitely should reach out to a feasibility consultant so they can dig into the market, they can understand the market, tell you the correct unit mix, if there should be a development there or not, based on what's happening in the market.
What I would do, Anthony, and Devin would probably say this, is I would go into that market looking for the owners that are scared because of that, and buy an existing facility on the way down, and go in and buy a value add place, and then buy it where you can make it make sense. And then people get scared and want to exit, not knowing what the public is doing. And there's ways to buy value add deals that way, I think, but that's just a different way of spinning it.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Devin, let's continue on. We got good questions kind of coming up from your slides, so I appreciate it.
No problem. So this is really just the challenges of building a solo site. Really, I just want to talk about the lender familiarity within the lending space. The lenders are becoming a little bit more familiar with RV and boat, but there's still not a lot of lenders that are willing to lend, especially with good terms on the space. Really, because when I talk to them, they think that somebody will drive off with what they're renting and not come back. If you're in the RV and boat space, it's not true. If you leave with a rig, or if you leave with your boat and you don't renew your terms, 9 times out of 10, that space is going to get backfilled that day. So for a lender to say, you're going to lose your revenue, I fight against that almost on a weekly basis, especially with an institutional lender who rental office, retail, multifamily, and they're trying to wrap their heads around the RV and boat space. More regional lenders, they have a better understanding of it, but it's still kind of beating somebody inside the head, trying to make them realize how good of a product type this is. And then shifting some of the interest rates, future interest rates. You know, at the end of last year, I think most of us thought we would have at least one pullback in interest rates so far this year. But because the economy did so well, because the job reports came back so strong, it doesn't seem like we're going to have a pullback in interest rates until potentially second half of this year. So the sentiment is changing. You know, interest rates are flat, but it's still not to the level where a lot of people can make sense of developing. Right now, it's just because of the higher interest rates. That being said, if the future interest rates is coming down, it might be a good time to at least start looking at sites getting into the industry now, hopefully knowing that interest rates will be pulling back more later on this year. And then rewards, higher returns is just yourself. If you don't have a partner, you're only responsible to your lender and yourself. Flexibility, you make the calls, quicker decision making. You're the one who signs on the dotted line if you're building this as a solo site. So should I invest in a partnership? So I kind of like this one. So you're actually, you know, if you're going to have a partner, you're going to be raising a child together, right? You're going to be in a marriage, and you're raising a very expensive child that likes to eat very expensive meals on a monthly basis. So please make sure you like the partner that you're getting in bed with. I don't know how many deals I've sold because of partnership issues. You know, one partner wanted to build that portfolio over 10 years and flip it out. The other partner wanted to retire, so they needed that income. They needed to sell a facility at stabilization to realize that income to be able to retire. And their business plans just did not align in the beginning. So make sure you like the person you're getting in bed with, and make sure your business plans align. And that kind of goes into, is it a slow growth company, or are you going to scale? And then how will your partnership be set up? And it kind of sounds kind of elementary, but you know, a lot of people just want to jump into the business without doing the legwork prior to, right? They don't know if it's going to be an equal partnership, especially if you're with a JV or private equity shop that are going to expect investor documents on a monthly basis, right? So just make sure you understand what you're getting into. I've seen groups lose facilities, or not really lose, but they didn't see a clause in their agreement saying that their partner had decision-making power. So the partner decided to sell the facility to realize that income, and the other partner was just left, you know, just holding air because they didn't understand what happened in that partnership document. So I'm not a lawyer, but get one. It'll suit you well moving through the process of having a partner. So challenges, identifying the right partner, that's probably the biggest challenge. You know, you're going to be in bed with them for a long time, potentially. Capital commitments and venture capitalization is just, are you going to be a JV? Are you going to have a larger equity partner, et cetera? Cash distributions, you pay your lender, then you pay your investors if you're waterfalling it down, and then you reap the returns up to that. And then capital calls, depending on how you're set up, there's two kind of capital calls. The good one is you find a piece of property or find a facility that you want to purchase, and you do a capital call to build the equity while you're searching for debt. Or bad capital call, going back to the 3% developer, you know, you have to cover that delta each month by doing capital calls until you're in the black. So, you know, it's a lot more intricate having a partnership, but the rewards are you get to build the scale faster. You have a lot more equity behind you. Expedited site selection process. My belief is everybody on this call is either looking for an acquisition or looking for a development site, or of course making the property better. But you know, timing is of the essence in today's market. So you know, being able to site select in an expedited way will help you at the end of the day. And then stronger lender relationships. Once you build your first site and potentially build a portfolio, now you have a proof of concept. Now you can present that proof of concept to your lender, and I would say it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be easier getting better terms through that lender because you have a proven concept. And especially with Class A facilities, right? That's what they want to see. they really don't want to see, this goes into municipalities as well, they really don't want to see the dirt lots. They do want to see canopies or fully enclosed, and that's much more attractive to a lender, even though they're looking at returns of how that's going to be proven out moving forward. So part two, any questions so far on that? If not, no worry, I can keep going.
Let's roll through it, and then we'll be able to save about 15 minutes at the end for any questions or things.
Perfect. So why is investing in a luxury RV and boat facility so desirable? The biggest one for me, limited competition and limited sales for now. Yes, the institutional side of the business is taking off, but kind of break it down for you. In 2021, I believe there were just over 600,000 RVs shipped. In 2022, there were about 430,000 RVs shipped. In 2023, there were around 320,000 RVs shipped. The projection for 2024 is around 350,000. So that's about, give or take, 1.5 million RVs shipped in 3 years. We don't have that many facilities under development to be able to handle all those facilities if we're talking about Class A. And honestly, I would say all classes of RVs and boats right now. So there is limited competition. You know, we are seeing a lot of pocketed development, and that's really in the Sun Belt states right now. You're talking Florida, everybody wants to be in Florida for some reason. I get it, but you know, the insurance cost is high out there. Texas, everybody wants to be in Texas. You know, you can build them bigger in Texas. But there's other areas in the market that are just as, or might even be better for RV and or boat development. You know, the Ozarks, the Great Lakes, the Pacific Northwest. We're starting to see a lot more institutional builds in those regions that have been overlooked for so long until now. And I don't want to, I think Illinois, I have to check back, but I think Illinois had the most RV shipped last year to that state. So, you know, there's areas that, like I said, have been overlooked that are great drivers for the RV and boat world. We talked about shifting interest rates, but that really goes into the value of the facility, right? If you're owning a facility right now compared to traditional self-storage, across the board for traditional self-storage, we're seeing rental rates going backwards and going down, you know, 10 to 15% in most areas. For RV and boat, we haven't seen the rental rates either staying flat for the owner or they're still increasing. On the flip side of that, because we have higher interest rates, we have higher cap rates. So your revenue is raising, but the value of your property is either staying flat or going down for the time being. So my belief is once the Fed, whenever they want to do so, I never believe anything the Fed says until they actually do it. Whenever they pull back rates, you know, that value of those facilities is going to go up. We're going to start seeing a boost in sales of those properties. Risk versus rewards, money spent versus money received. I would say spend your money correctly on facilities. Put the correct amenities in or at your property for that specific market, right? For California, add solar. I'm not going to talk about that. You can talk to Chris Coney. You can talk to Bob Hayworth about it. They speak leaps and bounds about the product type because of the buyback factor for the electricity. If you're adding a wash, if you're adding a dog park or a playground, you know, there's liabilities there, of course, but it's going to really depend on your market. So spend the money correctly for the facility, and you'll reap the rewards at the end of the day. I had a client who bought a class, I would say class B, it was just an asphalt facility, no canopies. And they were charging 35 cents a square foot for a 12 by 30 space. They added canopies, and I believe they spent $18 a square foot for the canopies at the time. And they charged 75 cents once they just added canopy. So not saying that happens every time, but you can almost double your rates just by adding the correct amenity for that location. And then, sorry, I look at my computer. And we kind of talked about this, but it's a big point for me. Underwrite conservatively in this market, right? If it's a 35-cent market and you believe you can get 50 cents per square foot, underwrite the 35 cents and then push for 50 cents. You want to make sure you can satisfy your lender. You don't want to go over your skis with the value of your property. I've seen it many times, and back in 2021 during COVID, when everybody's pushing rates, you could underwrite as aggressively as you wanted. More often than not, you could hit that mark. But in today's market, I would say underwrite conservatively and then be aggressive with your lease up if you need to be, but know your property works at that very, very conservative market. Higher valuations, we kind of spoke about that. Class A's, of course, they do garner a premium over the Class B's and Class C's. Higher achieved rates, limited tenant turnover, we kind of spoke about that as well. If somebody finds a facility that they like with good security, good lighting, great amenities, more often than not, they're going to want to stay at your property. One of the biggest items stolen from an RV is the catalytic converter. That's a huge, huge thing. So having the right type of security, the right type of fencing will at least deter. It won't stop them, but it will deter them if you have that Class A and a Class, I would say, C dirt lot with a chain link fences beside you. I would say they would go that chain link fence because it's easy access. So we have 3 more minutes. So real quick, where's the RV and boat industry heading? It's really the future growth, right? And I spoke about this briefly before, but I believe that the state of the RV market that we're in today's market is where self-storage was 25 years ago. The Class B moving into the Class A institutional side, we're right there. We're on that cusp. So you're entering the business, in my opinion, at the perfect time. We're starting to see that shift, and you can realize the income that a Class A facility will garner, right? If somebody's storing a $500,000 vehicle at your facility, I was willing to bet that they are willing to spend $300 to $400 a month to protect that vehicle in a nice location. The largest group out there right now only owns about 57 stores across the nation. Compared to Extra Space, I think they're 2,800 stores now with the acquisition of Life Storage. So we are in the infancy of this space. And then cap rates. The cap rates that we're seeing today are ranging, depending on location, between 5.5% to 7.5%. Now, if you're in a tertiary market, of course, you're in the higher scale. If you have a dirt lot, that's close to a 10% cap rate. But places like San Diego, Miami, some places in Arizona, Pacific Northwest, you're in that 5.5, I would say the 6.25 cap rate on trailing 12s. And I think we're going to see that compress a little bit more once interest rates start shifting moving forward. So I think we're at 9.45.
Just a quick question while you're doing that on cap rates. You're going to have to underwrite for a much higher cap rate when you're going in on a development because you can't get debt at 5.5, especially if you're using private equity money.
Right. Sorry, this is for already existing
Resale.
Yeah, so I apologize about that. Yeah, so cap rates going in, we underwrite to around 9.5 to 10% cap rate for a deal. If you're looking to sell it at C of O, I would say don't, because you're not going to realize the value of your property at C of O, and people won't give you that value that you know it's worth.
Most C of O deals gone for the day more.
Exactly. They want to see it at least 60% full or more. And granted, if you're building a property, an RV and boat property, depending on size, you can lease it up in 9 to 12 months, right? And that's not a long period of time to realize that growth in value,
right,
just by holding it for less than a year, right? So I would suggest if it was a seller's market or you're trying to sell it, I would suggest at least leasing it up to 60% and then seeing where you're at.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Anthony, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. Had my boys get the dogs coming in and out of the, I had to turn close the door in the background. So Want to go through a couple quick questions and stuff like that. Jay, I want to answer your question if you're looking at underwriting deals or anything else like that. Or if you guys want to find out more information, I did put a link in the chat if you're in Zoom right now to the Toy Storage Nation website. So highly recommend go check that out. They also do have a newsletter that you can subscribe to as well. So that gets sent out, get a lot of good updated information and different events, different things that I know Amy is putting on, they're putting together and stuff like that. So I highly encourage you guys, everybody who is really interested in this asset class, to go check out their website. And so Adam was also asking, what is typical demographic data rundown on an average ideal new construction deal? So
just typical demos in the market.
So what would what data would you look at for a class A? Like what things would you think qualify?
So I would look at, first I would go out, like I said, about 15 miles or 30-minute drive. I would look at the household incomes in that market, right? If we're talking about class A right now, you want, I would say, at least 75,000 median household income or higher, because those are the people who more often than not can afford that type of vehicle that you want stored at your facility, right? The class Bs and class Cs, you're storing the $50,000 pull behind. The class A's, you're talking the $300,000 plus RVs and the, I would say, $200,000 plus boats, depending on your market. Then I would look at rental rates in the market if you can find them, and the number of households in that market. I think that one of the biggest drivers is that destination. Where are they trying to go to? And you look at, the people who are actually visiting those properties, either would say like Yellowstone or Yosemite, or destination like Lake Tahoe, right? What type of vehicles are being stored there, or what type of visitors in there, that type of income will be renting there. You can kind of base it on that.
So then I might add also, I think an overlooked thing is the Sprinter vans. A lot of folks don't realize a lot of times HOAs, and this is all contingent because HOAs have gotten tougher and tougher, right? A lot of people are buying a boat or RV, they're driving it home and then going, where do I put it? But Sprinter vans as well. There's issues with those not being allowed in HOAs, or the garage not being big enough. Razors as well. We find that communities start around that with the toys. Someone starts to put their toys in a certain location, and then their buddies want to be there too. So, it's a lot of different things that people are using this for.
I say, as much as I hate HOAs, we love them in storage. Personally, but on the opposite end and stuff like that. So this question came up to twice, so it's a really, really good question. What are you seeing for development costs like right now to build a class A, like enclosed versus canopy? Kind of like the sizes that are like the most desirable.
Yeah, so what we're seeing right now for, I would say, canopy, depending on your site cost, right? You're in that $35 to $60 a square foot range. It's going to be really dependent on location as well. If you're in Oklahoma, it's going to be cheaper to build than if you're in San Diego. But that being said, the average is about $35 a square foot to $60 a square foot to build out. Now, if you're talking fully enclosed facility, then you're getting closer to what it would cost to build a traditional self-storage property at that point. And we're seeing traditional self-storage properties in the range of $90 a square foot hard cost, right? Some of them are $123 a square foot for hard cost, depending on what type of amenities, if it's conditioned, et cetera. So there is a delta between just canopied and fully enclosed right now.
What would you say like a feasible or dollar per square foot on land would be? Or do you have kind of like a rough number?
Yeah, I would say, and Amy, you can figure as well, but I would say, most people are looking for $5 and under a square foot. I would preface that with what kind of rates can you achieve in that market, right? If it's a 60-cent market, then $5 a square foot kind of makes sense. If it's a dollar market, then you go up to, I would say, $8, $9 a square foot. And I would say it depends on the size of the property or how many spaces you want to put in that property as well. So there's a lot of intricacies on, you know, land costs, definitely. But if you want to be safe, I would say $5 and under, depending on, you know, the location and rents in the market.
All right. I want to grab this question from Shannon. Shannon's from XPS Solutions, so the call center. Always love having her on because she comes up with different questions from a vendor side. So I found it very interesting that lenders have a distinct preference for Class A. You think that cash would be king, and sometimes, you know, like a a Class B or a little bit lower class in Class A would be making more money. Can you kind of reference that or talk a little bit about it? I know you mentioned it a little bit, but
Yeah, I think it's really just their comfort level with the space, right? You know, they're comfortable knowing that you're building a Class A facility with these type of amenities because they know people will stay and store at the property. The comfort level with, you know, I would say Class C, we're just talking about, you know, dirt lots or just asphalt. At that point, you're talking about a parking lot, and just a parking lot with no amenities, nothing to actually keep a tenant at the property. So yes, they could make the same amount of money as a Class A, but the visual of it is more appealing as far as the lender side from what they shared with me. They want to know that it's the resale value, if they do have to take it back, which is never a positive thing, but it's the nature of the industry, the resale value will still hold if they take a Class A back compared to a Class C property where now we're just talking about a dirt lot, and that value would just be land at that point.
gotcha. And that makes sense. You know, it's all about curb appeal. You know, you can kind of talk, you know, you visualize, just like you said, you know, visualization, the curb appeal to attract the kind of tenants. And you guys were mentioning that earlier, you know, that the kind of tenants and stuff that really pay their bills and stuff, you know, on time and stuff like that are the ones who can definitely afford the monthly bills and payments and insurance all on these big toys and stuff. Jeremiah, I know you got a question, you had your hand raised and stuff like that. Feel free to unmute yourself.
All right. Hey, thanks, Amy. Thanks, Devin, for hopping on this morning. This actually is very fitting for me. I do currently own a site with existing non-climate controlled drive up storage units on it. I recently replatted some other land to expand the size of the lot. So now I have some room for expansion. Over the past couple of years, my biggest demand has been parking, RV parking, boat, all that. So I'm leaning more towards, you know, doing basically just a parking expansion. What is the best plan of attack for strategic site development, as far as, you know, you got this plat of land, best and highest use? How do I position parking spaces? Do I do canopy? Do I do fully enclosed? Like, what does that process look like? I don't know if Amy or Devin, you want to take that, but that's kind of where I'm at in my journey. Is I need to get a site plan so I can go to developers and get costs and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think Amy spoke to it perfectly before, right? Get the feasibility, make sure it works in that market for the rates that you suspect you can achieve in that market. I can do, you know, a high level look at it to make sure it works on a surface level, but once you start talking about unit mix and the best setup for the property, I would say, you know, speak to Joe Best, speak to Greg Ellsworth, speak to any of the feasibility people, because they will help you in your plan of attack on your initial stages. To Brian's point, he spoke earlier, you know, you want to do this ahead of time to make sure you don't have any issues moving forward.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception sometimes that, you know, it's looking at the overall site and saying, does this work? They get very, very nitty gritty on the unit mix and what will work.
Are there consultants that, like, if you've proven Devan, that you can go to that will take your site plan and start at least throwing some ideas out and putting parking spaces on the map, and that you work with?
You know, I think Joe Beth White and Jim Chiswell are two folks that I would send you to, and they get pretty in depth as far as, you know, the number, I do think then they have to work with someone to obviously map it all out at that point, the specific, but they'll know given the size of the land and whatnot. But they focus on boat and RV storage. This is what they do. They know what works in certain markets. There's a lot of things that they take into play into their kind of mix as far as what they decide is going to be best for you. And they get very, very detailed on it. And so if you want to email me at amy.bix, it's just amy.bix@toystoragenation.com. Let me know what type of experts you're looking for, and I'm happy to give you some contact information.
That is what I was looking for. If you could put that in the chat, Amy or Anthony, if you want to put her email in the chat, or probably better to do it.
I'll also
up
give
in the
you my
group.
phone number too, if you want,
Yeah.
Anthony. And I'm sorry, I don't know how to. I'm
No, it's
looking for
okay. So what
the
I'll do,
tab.
Amy, for everybody, because I know I'm recording the Zoom as well as we're live on Facebook. I'm gonna go back and edit the Facebook Live. So I'll include Amy and Devin's contact information in there so they can reach, you guys can email them directly, you can, reach out to them and stuff like that. We got a couple last minutes to 3 more minutes before I want to wrap this up, because I definitely want to respect you guys' time. I'm sure you guys have a really, really busy day. One thing that I want to do, Amy, do you guys have any events or anything that's coming up that people can attend to really get an in-depth, in-depth look at this, or an educational?
Sure. Thank you for asking. So, first of all, I think one important point to know is typically our events, and this is what's really awesome. We understand that this is a different market than storage, but you would think that most folks that come to our events are from traditional storage. 70% of the folks who attend our workshops have never been a part of storage in any way. So it's really awesome that we're bringing in a whole new group of people. That being said, I think we're starting to see more and more come from storage on over, and that leads me into our next event will be April 5th. It's a full day workshop. It's going to be held. We do this one in partnership with Inside Self Storage. They don't see us as a competition because we're covering a part of the market that they really don't get to in depth. It's the last day of Inside Self Storage, that Friday. Just like we have Devin, who covers the investing side, and he can talk to you about many, many different areas of boat and RV storage. We have experts covering just about everything you can think of: enclosed construction, canopy. Bob Hayworth takes us on a facility tour. Jo Beth White is covering feasibility. We've got marketing, legal, you name it, A to Z. If you go to toystoragenation.com and you go under the events tab and look at Las Vegas, you're going to see the lineup. And then it'll send you, because we do this one with ISS, the registration happens to be on their page. But we do 4 workshops a year. This one will be, if you're already in the storage area and you're going to be at ISS, maybe that's the one for you to go to. But we purposely pick areas throughout the country. We do 4 of them a year. They're pretty intensive. They start at 7:30. Devin knows this, and I keep it moving. And at about 6 o'clock. But we want to get to every topic that you're going to need. But I would say even more important than the content you're going to get that day is being able to have one-on-one time with these experts. We purposely build time into the day that you get to talk and ask your specific questions of the speakers and companies and experts that are going to be there. We do not want this to grow into, per se, a large trade show, right? We want it to be an intimate workshop environment so you have that one-on-one time. And can have your questions asked, and having all these experts in one place in one day is a pretty cool thing. In addition to that, Anthony, I promise I'm only going to take another couple of seconds.
Yeah, fine. We're good on time, as long as you can take as long as time as you need.
And I'm not trying to
Respect
sell
your
anyone
time.
on this stuff. I'm trying to give you resources if you are interested in this market, because if you do look at the types of folks that are very happy to help everyone, it's someone like Devin and the depth of content and knowledge and expertise in this market. We're really happy to share this with everyone. We do have a membership program if you go to our website. The biggest part of that is that we will have a guide coming out, a boat and RV storage guide in March. That's part of that membership. And I know that our editor has been working with all of our experts. I know Devin contributed an article, but boy, that thing is going to be jam-packed with information. and a lot of information. We purposely aren't having advertisers in there and whatnot. We really want it to be an informative guide, and that's part of the membership program. So you might want to take a look at that.
I just
And thank
posted
you.
some, yeah, thank you very much. I just
Thank
posted
you for
some links
having us.
too, if anybody wants to grab them, before we close this out. Any links that I'm putting in the Zoom, I will definitely transfer them over to the Facebook Live as well, or in there, so that this recording will be available for anybody to watch. Devin, Amy, thank you guys very, very much. And like I said, I've been looking forward to this. I think you guys covered quite a bit, and really exceeded my expectations. So with that,
Can I ask one last
yeah,
question?
go ahead.
Real quick. I know that maybe for Jeremiah too, when you're talking about space size, is it 12-foot wide or 14-foot wide? I'd rather build a better mousetrap for people for usability from a consumer standpoint than to say, hey, I'm going to cram as many in as I can because I'm concerned about every penny, square footage wise. I'd rather be more functional and get a better usage out of it from a consumer than, nitpick every square foot. But so what's a better space, 12-foot wide or 14-foot wide for usability?
I would say both. I know that doesn't really help you, but if you're attracting the larger the RVs, like $500,000 vehicles, then you want 14-foot wide, right? Because the mirrors on the side of the size of the vehicles, they're wider than 10 feet, right? So you want, especially if you're building canopies, you want to be able to clear the space for 14 feet. But you want to be able to have that tenant mix as well to attract the smaller vehicles, right? So I would say that also
too wide to where they would want to leave their slides open all the time. It needs to be a functional yet not live there kind of thing, to where, you know what I mean?
Right.
Where they get slides out enough to make it functional, but I'm just trying to figure that out, and it's how my brain thinks as far as the process of what's usable and what's
it depends on how big your facility you're building too, right? You don't want to have a crazy mix if you're building a 100-space facility. You want to leave it to the plus, right? Right, exactly. So I would say 12 by 35 and 14 by 35 and 14 by 50s, whatever it may be, but really, really dive into what the market can bear, and who's actually going to be storing at the facility. It can't hurt to get, to build 14-foot wide spaces, but to your point, you won't be able to fit as many spaces on your property either, but you'll be getting higher rents. So, it's a weight. Which one's better for that property?
Because I know sometimes I would think that depending on who you're having do a market study, a feasibility can be driven by how many spaces can we squeeze on the lot versus they're trying to maximize the profitability rather than to maximize the usability, which creates profitability, in my opinion. So
I think the people that Amy mentioned definitely don't just go for profitability. They do the usability. It's their reputation online as well. So they want to make sure the site works for you in your use. Yes, they'll follow your lead as far as what you want as far as profitability, but they will tell you, look, this will not work in this market. We need to shift
Right,
the
and
site plan.
they're also going to look at who you might be missing out on if you don't have the spaces large enough. So that all comes into it. The number one thing I've learned from them is the first thing you look at when you're looking at potential sites is what's the rent I could get. And I get what you're saying, more is better. But then if you're missing out on some customer that you could be getting, they don't want that to happen either.
Yeah,
and
I went through
like you've got a nice piece of land to kind of play around with there.
Well, I went through a challenge recently where I had a piece of land. I gave it to somebody to give me a site plan, like Jeremiah talked about, as far as laying out sites. And it was like I was pulling teeth to get what I had in mind versus what should be done. And all they were doing was taking a program and putting parking spaces on a lot. And there was no feedback to,
you don't want that.
I really think this should work or that should work, or if versus a 60-degree angle or a 90-degree angle, I want someone to take my ideas and say, this, like you said, this will work or this won't work, or let's tweak it this way to make it better, not just put a piece of drawing on it, because that just wastes time.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys. Did a good job.
Again, I promise I'm not trying to overhype Devin here, but he's so well versed on all areas of the kind of process, and that's what's been really great with the folks that are in this industry. They're not just looking at the piece that they deal with. They've really educated themselves on the home market and the process of all of this. So
Awesome. You guys, thank you again. Thank you very, very much. I'll make sure, like I said, everything will be in our Facebook group and put a little bit of shout out so that if you can catch that. Otherwise, just like Amy said, check out toystoragenation.com. A lot of good information on there and resources on there as well. So with that, hopefully everybody has an awesome rest of your week, and let's go build some boat and RV storage.
we need to
That
have,
works.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.